A quiet evening walk turned into a turning point I never saw coming. My grandson, usually all quick jokes and loose shoelaces, matched my stride along the river path and told me something that changed how I saw him, our family, and the parts of the past we tried to keep neatly folded away. I thought we were out for fresh air. He had come for something else, something he'd been carrying alone for too long. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. The light was doing that gentle thing it does at the edge of day, when the river looks like it's been polished, and the cottonwoods wear their leaves like quiet bells. We walked past the old footbridge where, years ago, I used to carry his backpack and he'd insist on carrying my purse as a gentleman. He's taller now, taller than his father was at that age, and his steps were measured, as if keeping time with something I couldn't hear. I asked about school, about his part-time job at the hardware store, about the dog that insists on sleeping on his folded laundry. He answered, but each reply felt like a stone skipped once and left to sink. At the bench near the willow, he slowed without sitting, brushing a frayed thread at his sleeve. "Grandma," he said, then stopped. The word was faithful as Sunday, but the silence that followed wasn't. I could feel it, the way you can feel a storm long before the first drop. We kept walking. Gravel muttered under our shoes. From a nearby porch came the smell of someone's supper, onions softening in butter, a memory wrapped in steam. He cleared his throat once, then again, like a man rehearsing a line he's not sure belongs to him. I looked at his profile in the softening light. The jaw he got from my side of the family, the careful eyes from his mother's. He was a child and a man all at once, as if two versions of him were trying to share the same narrow path. "Do you remember that summer I stayed with you after Mom's car broke down?" he asked. I nodded. We'd baked a pie from bruised peaches and eaten it warm, the crust a little tough because I'd rushed it. We'd watched an old baseball game on TV with the sound turned low, my late husband's cap on the armrest between us like a polite guest. "I remember," I said. He picked up a leaf and folded it along the veins until it made a small, uneven boat. "I learned something that summer," he said. "Something I didn't know how to talk about." We passed the churchyard where the bell doesn't ring anymore. The first stars were winking on, as if testing their bulbs. I felt that old instinct rise, the one that makes you want to fix scrapes and stitch seams and straighten picture frames, but I knew this wasn't a problem with an easy hinge. This was a door only he could open. "You can tell me," I said, careful with each word. "No rush." He took a breath that seemed to travel all the way down to his shoes. "It's about family," he said slowly. "About promises people make when they're trying their best. And about the way those promises sometimes miss." He looked at me then, not past me, not through me, but at me, steady as a lighthouse beam. I felt the evening gather around us, the river holding its breath, the path listening. "I've been angry," he said. "Not just at Dad for what he couldn't be there for, but at myself for pretending it didn't matter." He glanced toward the water, eyes shining, not with tears exactly, but with the shine of truth finally reaching the surface. I didn't know where to put that anger, so I hid it where I thought no one would notice. We stopped at the far end of the trail, where the map on the sign has been sun-faded to a ghost of itself. A breeze lifted the willow's long hair and let it fall again. "I notice," I said. "I notice you. I always have." He swallowed, and the small leaf boat crumpled in his hand. "There's more," he said, voice low. "I want to tell you the rest, but I need to know. If I do, will it change how you see me?" I took his hand, warm and shaking, and held it like a vow. It might change how I see the past, I said. But not you. And there, as the last line of sunlight slipped from the path, he finally began. We stood there, hand in hand, as the evening pressed its cool fingers across the riverbank. His words had cracked open a door I hadn't realized was locked, and the air between us was thick with all the things he hadn't said yet. I could see it in the way his shoulders squared and then slumped, as if he couldn't decide whether to carry the weight or finally let it down. "Grandma," he said again, softer this time, almost testing if the words still had the same strength. "There's something I've been holding in for years. I never told Dad, never Mom. But you, I feel like you'll understand." I nodded, not speaking, just letting him see that I was steady ground. The night sounds were coming alive, the crickets tuning their strings, the faint hum of cars across the bridge, the river whispering its endless song. Everything around us seemed to pause, like the world itself wanted to listen. He drew a shaky breath. When I was younger, I used to think promises were like walls. Solid, permanent, things you could lean against. But then, he looked down at his shoes, the way a boy does when he's trying not to cry. Then I learned they can crack, and when they do, it feels like the ground goes with them. I reached for his arm, gently. "What promise broke, sweetheart?" His voice wavered but didn't break. Dad promised he'd be there for every game, every single one. And maybe it sounds silly, but I believed him. Then when he missed the first, I told myself it was just bad luck. But when it kept happening, it wasn't just the games I lost. I lost believing him. I lost believing me. The truth sat heavy between us, and I felt the ache he carried, not just disappointment, but the loneliness of a boy clapping for himself in the dark. My heart clenched at the picture of him sitting in that dugout, trying to hide the empty spot in the bleachers. "You don't know how many nights," he said, his voice trembling now, "I'd sit in my room replaying it all, wondering if I wasn't enough to keep a promise, wondering if maybe it was me. That broke me in a way words can't shape. I wanted to gather him back into the little boy who once held my purse on the bridge, to shield him from even the thought that love was earned by performance. "You were always enough," I said firmly, my voice steadier than I felt. "It was never about you. Sometimes people make promises with their whole heart, but life pulls them away. Your father's love wasn't measured by attendance at a game. It was deeper, even if he couldn't always show it." He looked at me, eyes glassy, searching. "But how do you carry something like that? How do you forgive someone when the ache doesn't fade?" I thought of my own father, who once promised me he'd be at my piano recital, but never came. I remembered sitting in a dress too stiff, the keys blurring under my tears. And yet, over the years, I learned that forgiveness isn't excusing. It's releasing. It's saying the wound won't own me anymore. "You carry it," I said slowly, "by turning it into something else. You use it to remind yourself to show up, to keep your word when you can, and when you can't, you tell the truth about why. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to step forward without chains." He was quiet for a long moment, and I let him be. The willow branches swayed above us, casting shadows that stretched like long fingers across the path. Then he whispered, "I want to be better than the promises I was given. But I'm scared I'll turn out the same." I touched his face gently, guiding his eyes back to mine. "You won't. Do you know why? Because you already see the cracks. And when you see them, you can mend them. That's how cycles break, sweetheart, when someone is brave enough to stop pretending they don't exist." His lips trembled, but he nodded, the first spark of relief flickering across his face. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just his story. It was ours. His burden had become a bridge, and by walking beside him, I could help him cross. We started back toward home, the stars burning brighter above us. His steps were lighter now, his voice no longer caught in his throat. And though he hadn't yet told me everything, I knew the hardest part had already passed. He had finally let someone in. And as the night folded around us, I felt the echo of his words settle into me, not as sorrow, but as a promise I intended to keep. The street lamps flickered on as we made our way back, little halos of gold spilling onto the quiet sidewalks. My grandson walked closer than before, his shoulder brushing mine every so often, as if to remind himself I was still there. The heaviness in his stride had eased, but I could sense there was more waiting at the edge of his silence. He had opened the first door. Behind it, deeper rooms remained. After a stretch of walking, he spoke again. "Grandma, do you know what I hated most? It wasn't the games Dad missed. It was pretending I didn't care. Everyone else would have someone cheering. I'd sit there, telling myself it didn't matter, while inside I was burning." His voice cracked a little, but he pressed on. "I learned to wear a mask early. At school with friends, I became the kid who shrugged everything off. And the thing is, the mask stuck. Even now, I don't know how to take it off. People think I'm fine, but I'm not always fine." We stopped near a corner store with its neon sign buzzing faintly. The light painted his face in uneven strokes, making him look older and younger all at once. I saw the boy who used to tug at my sleeve when he wanted another cookie, and the young man now wrestling with truths bigger than himself. "You've carried so much alone," I said softly. "That mask kept you safe when you needed it. But masks aren't meant to be worn forever. When you let people see what's behind it, you'll find the ones who truly belong in your life." He nodded, but his jaw tightened. "That's what scares me. What if they don't like what they see? What if they think I'm weak?" The question pierced me. I reached for his hand again, firm and steady. Strength isn't about hiding wounds. It's about showing them and healing anyway. Weakness isn't in honesty. It's in pretending forever. Do you know the bravest thing I've seen tonight? You, choosing to tell me. His eyes shimmered in the dim light, and he let out a breath he didn't seem to realize he was holding. I've been so afraid of letting anyone down, of not living up to the picture people have of me. But tonight, I don't know, it feels like if I don't speak now, I'll carry this weight until I'm old. The cricket's song swelled, and in the distance, a train rumbled across the tracks. He looked at me with a kind of urgency, as though words long trapped were finally clawing their way free. "Grandma," he said, voice low and trembling. I blamed myself for Dad leaving. For every missed promise, every fight he had with Mom. I thought if I'd been better, smarter, stronger, less of a burden, he would have stayed. I've carried that guilt for years. The confession landed in me like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading deep into my chest. I saw the weight he had carried, and I felt the injustice of it, that a boy could blame himself for wounds carved by adults. I squeezed his hand tighter. No child should ever feel responsible for a parent's choices. That was never your burden, love. You were not the reason he left. You were not the reason he broke promises. That guilt isn't yours. It never was. His lips trembled, and this time the tears did fall, slipping down in silence. I pulled him into me, resting his head against my shoulder like I had when he was small. He shook quietly, his breath catching in waves, and I held him without a word. When at last he pulled back, there was a quietness in his face, not emptiness, but the space grief leaves behind when it finally loosens its grip. "I've never told anyone that," he admitted. "Not even Mom." I thought it would sound childish, but it doesn't feel childish now. It feels real. It is real, I told him, and speaking it aloud is the first step to setting it down. We resumed walking, slower this time, the night air cooling the last of the day's warmth. For the first time in years, I felt he wasn't just walking beside me. He was walking toward something, toward himself. And I knew this conversation, this release, would echo not only in his life, but in mine. What he had shared was only the beginning. I could sense there was still more waiting in him, something deeper he hadn't yet named, but I was ready. When he was ready, I would be here, always. The night had fully settled by the time we reached my front gate, the porch light casting a soft circle across the steps. My grandson lingered there, his hand resting on the worn wood as if he wasn't ready for the moment to end. I could see it in his eyes. He had more to give, one last piece that needed air, and he was weighing whether his voice was strong enough to carry it. "Grandma," he said, his tone steadier now but weighted with something final. "There's one more thing I need to say, the hardest part." I nodded, giving him silence, the kind that makes room for truth. The cicadas buzzed their steady chorus, and the air carried the faint scent of lilacs from the garden, reminders that life always blooms again. He drew in a breath. All those years I thought it was my fault Dad left. I also thought maybe I'd end up like him. That one day I'd walk away from people who counted on me too. I've been terrified of becoming someone who breaks promises, who leaves behind disappointment. He looked down, his voice cracking but not stopping. But tonight, walking with you, I realized something. I don't want to run from the fear anymore. I want to face it. I want to be the one who stays. Tears blurred my vision, though I tried to blink them back. His words weren't just confession. They were a vow, spoken with a trembling courage that made my chest swell. I stepped closer, placing both hands on his shoulders, grounding him. "You are already different. Do you know why? Because you see the hurt, and you don't want to pass it on. That's the beginning of change. That's the seed of something better." For the first time that night, his lips curved into a small but certain smile. Not the mask he had worn for years, but a true smile, fragile and real. "Do you think I'll be strong enough?" he asked. I answered without hesitation. "Strength doesn't mean you'll never stumble. It means you'll keep choosing to stand back up. And you won't be standing alone, not while I have breath." We moved onto the porch, the boards creaking the way they always had, and sat together on the swing. The chain groaned as it carried our weight, swaying gently back and forth. Above us, the stars stretched wide and endless, a map of all the journeys yet to come. He leaned back, exhaling deeply. "I feel lighter," he admitted, "like I've finally set down a backpack I didn't realize I was still wearing." I rested my hand over his. "That's what happens when you share the weight. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes bearable. And now you know you don't have to carry it alone anymore." We sat there for a long while, saying nothing, letting the night wrap around us like a quilt. The river's murmur still reached us faintly, as though echoing the truth he had finally spoken. His story would stay with me, not as sorrow, but as a reminder. Healing often begins not in grand gestures, but in quiet walks, in simple words shared between two souls who choose to listen. When he finally rose to go, he hugged me tightly, longer than he ever had before. "Thank you for hearing me," he whispered. "I don't think I'll ever forget tonight." As I watched him walk down the path, his figure lit by the moon, I felt something shift inside me too. His confession had not only freed him, it had touched places in me I'd long kept sealed. His courage reminded me that no matter the years behind us, there is always room for honesty, always space for forgiveness, always time to love deeper. And though the night grew quiet once more, his words still echoed in me, like the lasting toll of a bell. I want to be the one who stays. I knew then that he would, and I knew, just as surely, that this walk would live in both our hearts for the rest of our days.